Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of Dev Drawer. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today we're going to be going over how to set up Visual Studio Code. A lot of my video, or all of my videos, have to deal with my ability to use Visual Studio Code. And as of now, Visual Studio Code is one of the most popular IDEs out there for web development or visual front-end development. So it's something that you should definitely know how to use. In the past, I've used things like Notepad++ and Sublime, but once I landed on Visual Studio Code, I kind of found out that this one is probably the best editor out there that I've tried, at least. From the shortcut functionality to the extensions that have been built for it, there's a lot of things that just makes Visual Studio, it works clean. It works fast. I haven't really seen anything that I can do in here that's where it doesn't do it as good as something else. Every instance that I've seen, it always does it better. So today I'm going to be staying inside of Visual Studio Code and just kind of showing you some of the things that you can do inside of it to make it better for you as a developer. Let's go over some of the basic command functionality that I use that you might have seen in some of my videos. First one is going to be where you pull up your terminal, and the way that I do that on my Windows machine is hit the Control or Command key if you're on Mac, and then the tilde key. It's the one next to the number one, and that brings up the terminal. And then right now you can see that it's kind of defaulted into command, but I can actually run a SSH command and pull it up into a server. Then I'll actually be interacting with that server in real time. I can also come over here, run git commands. So this terminal it's a very cool terminal that you can have. Since I've started using it, I no longer use Windows PowerShell, and I definitely don't use the straight command prompt. Everything's kind of built into my Visual Studio Code. Another thing that you may have seen me do before is if you hit Control B, it hides. It just makes your screen a little bit bigger, but it basically hides your file structure here. And then you can see a lot of their stuff here. So you got the Control tilde key to open up the terminal. You can run debugging. You can go to specific files. You can also open up their command palette here by typing Control-Shift-P, which you can see here, and that brings up like your commands that you use on a regular basis. Like for example, whenever I want to take a snapshot of some of the code that I'm doing and push it out to Instagram or Twitter, I will go into Polycode, and then I'll go over here and just copy and paste the code, and then make an image of it. It basically makes a clean image of your code. And this is an extension that I installed. And the way that you can go and install extensions is you have this little icon over here. You can click on it to see extensions that you currently have installed, or you can search for new ones. So if I didn't have Polycode and I wanted to add it, I can just type in Polycode and it will pull up Polycode, which this is not the one that I have. One of these versions of it is the one that I have installed. But essentially you can pull anything from an extension marketplace, and then you can also come over here and set it up how you want to have it set up. So if you go to settings, you can see that you can modify your color theme. You can check and see what extensions you have again. You can also go to those extensions, like for example, if I wanted to do something with a live reload, I can type in live and it'll bring me all the stuff that is included in that live keyword. So I got the live SASS and then the live server, which I'll show you some of those in just a moment as well. So let's get out of the commands that you can run and actually go into some of the functionality that comes built into it. So if you've never heard of Emmet, Emmet is like a shortcut language that you can use. So let's say, for example, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. And then over here, if I wanted to create like a boilerplate HTML5 code, I could just essentially just type in, I believe it's Shift, and then hit Enter. Or I'm sorry, it wasn't Shift, it was Shift 1, which gives you the exclamation point, and then hit Enter, and then it gives you like a boilerplate HTML5 code. Also, another thing that I can do inside of Emmet is, let's say I wanted to create a paragraph. I could create a paragraph tag, and then I wanted to have inside of that paragraph tag, I wanted to have lorem ipsum. So I can type in lorem, And let's say I want to have 10 words in lorem. So if I type in p lorem and 10, it gives me a 10-word lorem ipsum. We can also do something like this. So let's put it in parentheses, and we're going to do p lorem 15, and then we're going to multiply that by 3, and that'll give us 3 paragraph tags using lorem ipsum. So Emmet's a really cool, versatile tool, and it comes built into to Visual Studio Code or VS Code, and it just makes your workflow so much easier. I mean, you can even create something like this. So you do p, let's create a test class for it, and if you hit enter, it creates that code for you. And then we can also do something like this. So p test, and then we want to have a span inside of that with a test2 class, and if we enter, now we have the paragraph class test, span class test2. So a lot of really cool things that you can do with inside of Emmet, and it comes built in Visual Studio Code. So let's get into some of the stuff that's not built into Visual Studio Code that I use on a regular basis. One of them is going to be this live server, and then live reload, and live SASS. And everything has live on it just because it's pretty much essential for any kind of live development that you're wanting to do. And all of those extensions are installed from inside of here. So if we type in live, let's say like live server, Ritwik Day, I've mentioned him a few times on this, or I mentioned this person a few times on this channel, just because there's a few things that they have created that we use pretty much all the time as we're building out. One of our favorite, again, is live server and then live SASS, just because those are something that we can use all the time, anytime. So let me go ahead and get started into creating like a SASS file that we're going to watch using live SASS. So first thing I usually do is create a new folder, and this is going to be whatever you want it to be. I'm going to have a CSS folder, and then inside of that CSS folder I'm going to have an SCSS folder, and that's where we're going to keep our SASS at. And then whenever we save it, it's going to automatically add a style min and a style.css file to this CSS folder. So we can go in here and we create a new file. We're going to call it style.scss, and then this is going to create our style sheet. And then I'm just going to put in something simple here. So let's do body, and let's just do a background color. So background color of let's see, white. And now whenever we save that, we should be able to see it inside of the CSS folder for the style itself. Well, not quite, because we actually don't have it watching it yet. So it's not appearing yet. So with the extension watch CSS installed, you'll have this little icon down here at the bottom that says watch CSS or SASS, and if we click on this, it'll start watching what we have in there, and then it'll tell you that it also generated style.css and the min version of that CSS. So if we open up our style folder now, we can see that we have our original SCSS, our style, and then the minified version of that style, and all of it's created in real time. So if we modify something over here, and let's say we change the color to let's make it just off black, and whenever we go to save it, it watches it, generates it, and if we look over here, it's automatically added to where we need it at with the minified version and the standard version of CSS. So this is just a really cool extension if you're into building your own SASS themed website, and then integrating it into, like what we have over here. We can build it out so it uses that minified version. You can just add the style sheet references to this, and then every time you make a change over here, whether you're using variables or you're using just straight CSS, everything kind of keeps it in place for you, and it creates that dynamic, minified file and stuff like that. I created a whole tutorial about how to build your own SASS and some of the functionality and the variables that you can use, and I'll link to that in the description or in one of the cards that pop out above. But essentially, it's a pretty in-depth, detailed creating your own bootstrap theme using SASS. So it might be worth looking into if you're wanting to kind of figure out what SASS does and how you can utilize it for your own sites. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to something else now, and that's going to be the JavaScript. So now let's create a new folder, and we're going to call this JS, and I'm just going to create a new file called initialize.js. Then over here, just so we know that it's working, let's just type in something. So console.log, and then we're going to do hello world. All right, so that'll give us this JavaScript that we can reference, and then we need to include that in our document that we're creating here. So let's switch this out. We're going to say dev drawer HTML tutorial. And then we always want to have our JavaScript references down here at the bottom. So we're going to do script source equals this, and then that source is going to be js/initialize.js. So now that we have this, we can actually use one of the other extensions that we installed for the live server. So now, if you've installed that extension, you'll see another button down here that says Go Live. And if we click on this, it'll say that it's starting our own server, and then it'll kind of get to where it's going to load it up. And I can switch over to that so I can show y'all what that looks like right now. Okay, so now I switched to a view that y'all are pretty familiar with on my channel, my dual screen. But by firing up this live server right here, it actually opened up in 127.0.0.1.59.4.2.1 is the port, and then opened up this index.html file. Now, of course, this only works with HTML files, just because that's the way it works. I mean, there's a way that you can get around it using the live reload server extension that I have installed here, where you can actually point a named server, a local server, or whatever it is, to point to this specific project, and you can actually run PHP. But I'm not going to get into that. I think I've showed you guys that before in another tutorial. So we're just going to kind of go over some of the stuff that we can do here. So I'm going to open up a developer window here, so that y'all can see that. And this is just going to kind of show what's happening, where it's actually displaying hello world. And now I'm going to show you what happens now that we got this thing live reloading. We're going to come over here and we're going to do hello world test, and then save it. And you can see here it says hello world test. So it does all of these changes in real time. So if we come over here and we delete this, and we come over here and do an h1 tag, and we're going to say this is the dev drawer HTML tutorial, and now you can see that it's automatically updating over here. So one of the other cool extensions that you can do with inside of Visual Studio Code, and again, I went over this extension before in another video, but this is kind of showing you what all of the stuff that I use on a daily basis will look like. Okay, so now let's move on to, let's see, what else are we going to move on to? So now that we've kind of got the code looking at what we want it to be looking at, let's go into something else that Visual Studio Code also does right out the box, and that would be Git. Git is something that, if you're not familiar with it, definitely become familiar with it, because it is something that is definitely worth its salt in learning. So we're going to, let's go ahead and switch over to a Git interface. Actually, you know what? I'm going to run this through the command. So let's just close out of this. I'm going to open up a new terminal, and that's going to put us inside of this folder that we're currently in right here. So this dev drawer demo is the folder that we're in. And if we run a git status right now, obviously nothing happens because we haven't done anything. So if we run a git initialize, and then it's going to initialize, and you can see that it's highlighted all of these files as green. So now if we do a git status again, you can see that now it's watching everything inside of this folder for any changes that we may need to do. So we can run something like a git add all, and it's going to add all of these files. So if we do a git status again, you see all of these files are here. So eventually at the very end of it, when we want to push this thing out to an actual repository, we would run something like git commit -a -m, and then we'd push that message here. And obviously I'm not going to run it just because it's not connected to any Git repo, but that's how you would initialize a Git repo from within inside of VS Code, because that again is something that's built into it. So I'm not going to finish this command just because I have another video that shows you how to do all of this stuff. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and close out of my terminal and show you another really cool feature of Visual Studio Code. So one of the first things that I was confused by whenever I first started using VS Code is their usage of workspaces. So in Sublime, you had project folders, and then you can include anything you wanted to inside of that project folder, and it would become part of your project, but obviously that's a little bit bloated. You may not need that all the time. So what they have here is these things called workspaces. So I have a few different workspaces, but what I'm going to do is I can create a workspace that has just this information in it. It kind of leaves off exactly where you're at. So I'm going to create a workspace. I'm going to save workspace as, and I'm just going to call it workspace 1. So let's do workspace1.code. Alright, so and then that's going to save it into a folder. Obviously, I saved it into the same folder that we're currently in. The way that I typically use it is I have a folder on my desktop or in my shared folder files that I save all of my workspaces to, so regardless of what machine I'm on, I'm able to access those workspace settings and how everything is configured specifically for a project that I'm working on. So if we come over here and we do open folder, and we're going to open up a new folder that I created specifically for this video here, and it's just a blank folder. So it's going to bring us to this workspace that is completely empty. So we can make whatever changes that we want to here, and let's say we're done making the changes that we want to on this project, and we want to switch back over to our other projects. So we can go over here and open up folder and do that again, but since we saved it as a workspace, you can click on open workspace, and then we can go to that workspace file that we created, open it up, and it keeps us in the exact same place that we was. You know, everything is exactly how we left it off, even though we opened up a new project, because all of those workspace settings are created inside of that workspace that we saved. Now, you don't have to resave the workspace every time. It essentially takes whatever you're working on and it tracks it, so that whenever you get done with this project, you can open up a new project, do whatever you need to do on there, create a workspace or just exit out of it, and then open up this workspace again, and it'll keep everything that you kept in there inside of this workspace settings folder file that you've created. So I think that's pretty cool. It allows me to pretty easily switch back and forth between, you know, workspace 1, workspace 2, depending on whether I'm doing a Python development, PHP, WordPress, or I'm just accessing the server directly. I kind of have workspaces set up for individual projects just because it allows me to kind of keep everything in order, exactly how it should be. Another way that VS Code helps you streamline what you're doing is its Intellisense. And what do I mean by that? Intellisense, if you've ever used a good IDE for editing, it's basically, it kind of helps you figure out the next part of your code without you having to think too much about it. So we're going to modify our JavaScript file, but first I want to include jQuery into it. So I'm just going to copy Google's Ajax API for this project. So I'm just going to paste this link in there, which will give us accessibility to now be able to use jQuery on this side. Now we can try out the Intellisense for jQuery. So let's do $, and we're going to do document, and you can see now it's telling you what you can type next. So we're going to do document dot, and then there's other things that we can do here. So ready is the one that we're going to use here, and then we're going to pass a function to it and just get our jQuery set up. We could also do it the shortcut method by doing $, and then just doing function and then passing it like this, and that's the way that I like to do it. So I just wanted to show you the Intellisense that it has. So let's get rid of that part for now, and inside of it, let's do the console log inside of it, and then we're going to change some text in real time. So let's go over here and let's add a span around this. So let's do span class hero text, and then we're going to just wrap this text around that so that we can have it there for us. Okay, now we can take this out And actually, let me fix this because that's one too many. Here we're going to do whatever we called it. So $, and then this is going to be hero text, and then dot HTML, and then we're going to pass in, let's say something like sample text, so that it replaces that hero text with sample text. And we're going to close that out. And now we run it, and as you can see over here in real time, it updated to show sample text. And so if we didn't have this function in there, it'll show HTML tutorial, and we have it in here. So apparently I don't use JavaScript syntax too much on here because it's not pre-populating that text for me. There is some things that it does, like it can reference out the code that's being used in different parts of the documents or in other folders. So if you create your reference points correctly, it'll actually do that. So I think this is a simplistic way to show you some of the syntax Intellisense that it has without going into too much detail. But I mean, it comes built into it, and if you use heavy JavaScript, there is actually extensions that can do jQuery or whatever JavaScript language that you're using, whether it's Angular or React or whatever you're trying to accomplish. There is Intellisense for pretty much every programming language you can think of that you can add as an extension. So apparently I don't really use it too much outside of the PHP world, but I'm not going to run this as a PHP file. So I think that, let me see, what else can we do that I can show you on here that Visual Studio does pretty well. I think real quick, while I have this open and y'all can see it, this is all of the extensions that I have installed. And I'll kind of give you a rundown of what they are. So auto close tag helps me to close out some of the tags as I'm doing it. You'll see that whenever I type in some HTML, sometimes it closes the tag. Same thing with JavaScript and stuff like that. So it helps you you don't have to remember it at all times. It does it for you. Auto rename tag, again, just renames paired HTML and XML. So that way, let's say if you have a div tag and you want to change it to a paragraph tab, you update the first, the div to a P, and then at the very end of it, it automatically updates from a div to a P tag. So that's a pretty useful tool as well. The bracket pair colorizer is a really good tool. As you can see here, we have the purple bracket that is open here. We have the closing bracket that's also purple, the yellow parentheses, and then the closing parentheses is yellow, and then you have blue here, so it highlights it so you can see what brackets and stuff like that is actually related to where it starts and where it ends at. Code spell checker, just because I'm terrible at spelling. If you've seen any of my videos, you know that. So this helps me check through the text of my code to make sure that I'm spelling things correctly, which helps me on a day-to-day basis. What it does is it highlights, like right here, it has hero text. Obviously, that's not a word, that's a class that I made up. But for real text, it would actually let me know that there's something wrong with this. Jupyter is something that I've installed on my Linux laptop just to help me it adds some functionality to my Linux laptop to work better with Visual Studio or VS Code. So you don't necessarily need that one. Live SASS is what I showed you guys earlier with style.scss. It compiles it in real time. Live server is what we just had open, where it shows, it actually compiles the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as if you're actually running it from a server. It does everything in real time. Open API Editor is a pretty cool tool. So you have this right here, and then you can either open up an API file or you can pull one in and it just breaks it down, and you can create your paths. It kind of lays out everything that you would do in API. And it just makes it where it's a little bit easier to read compared to having to create all the JSON yourself. It actually kind of structured it out for you, and then it makes it where it's compatible with OpenAPI 3. So if you're ever looking at some of my Swagger tutorial videos, this is a pretty good extension to have on your computer. And then I went over earlier what Polycode is. Polycode is really cool. especially if you do anything like share your code on Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. It basically just where you can come over here, let's say like this part right here, I want to highlight it, and then actually no, I need to open up Command P, and then I'm going to say not Command P, Control Shift P to open up this, run Pola code, and then I can take this code over here and I can highlight it, and what it does is it creates this image. And then you can also customize the way that the image looks, so you can see what it looks like. You can change the color of it, and then whenever you get done modifying it, you can click on this and it'll actually open it up and save it as an image for you. So pretty cool little extension if you do any kind of code sharing on social media. And then prettier, you may see this one whenever I'm going through, and sometimes when I'm editing JavaScript or I'm editing HTML or CSS or anything like that, what it does is it just formats it a lot better. Like for example, if I come in here and change this to single quotes, and you can always customize this to kind of fit how you want it to be. So whenever it goes to save, it changes it to double quotes. So it's just a something that I'm doing. You can go in there and kind of customize it however you want it to be. It also goes in there and makes sure that your your alignments are correctly done and stuff like this. So it's a really cool tool to have. Let's see, and I think that covers about everything that I do in Visual Studio Code. So yeah, so if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to know about something else that I do in VS Code that I didn't show in this video, leave me a comment below. If you like this setup, if you like the tools that I use, hit the thumbs up on the video for me. Let me know that you like it and you want to see other kind of videos like this. I have other things, like I have an entire use case study of what I did with Sublime for years. In case you're not, Visual Studio Code may not be something that interests you. Sublime is also another very good IDE that I've used in the past. So if you're interested in something like that, give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. I guess that'll do it for now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you like videos like this, or you like other tutorial videos, I try to do it at least once a week. So give me a subscription, hit the bell notification, and I will talk to you later.